Next project. I want to replace the mechanical distributor driven tachometer in my Corvette with this, a later model distributor for the Corvette. But this one is an electronic version. You're watching On the Mark with Mark. Now this is probably easier than a lot of jobs that would be for changing some car over from mechanical to an electronic tach, because this whole assembly here is the same. This one came out of 75, 6, or maybe a 77. They started the electronic tach in 75, and I believe it stayed looking like this until 77. And then in 78 they had a different bezel arrangement. But anyway, I don't know for sure. I got this at a swap meet for like 30 bucks, which wasn't too bad a deal. But what I don't like about it is it's got a different font than what my 73 has. This is the font that the 73 has. I bought this at a swap meet also, and this is anticipation of replacing the engine in my Corvette with a high performance engine. And so this one has got a $6,000 red line on it, whereas this is more your standard, I think it's a 3,500 RPM red line, which is what's in the car right now. But I'll be taking that mechanical one out, and then I'll lose that cable that goes out into the engine bay and attaches to the distributor, so clean up my engine bay a little bit too. So that's kind of cool. The other thing I did, you can see these wires on here. This is where a friend of mine and I, we hooked this thing up to the car and tested it, because I didn't want to put a bunch of time into it if it wasn't any good. And it does work, and it's really nice. I'm not kidding you, that mechanical tach, I don't know what's wrong with it, but when I rev the thing up, I mean, the thing is sweeping all over the place, and then I go up and I shift gears and it's all over, and I'm trying to take, well, what is the average of this? Whereas this one is just, just dead on accurate. So that's super sweet. So anyway, we used the regular connectors on the back of here for the test, but then I have purchased the correct plug that goes onto the back of this. As far as dollars for this project, I paid $30 for this at a swap meet, which I looked for quite a while before I found one, so probably I could have got it for less, but I took a gamble that it didn't even work, and the guy didn't guarantee that would work either. He did not know. So there's $30, and the new face is $30, and then this stupid thing shipped to me, and I don't know if they had a minimum shipping cost, $24. So I'm into it for quite a bit of money, but it should be a fun project. So let's tear into it. I've labeled the back of this so that when I go to wire this thing up, I don't wire it up incorrectly. From what I understand, you can burn out that printed circuit board if you do. So I was just looking at that printed circuit board, and it's 70 bucks if I have to replace it. So we'll try not to do that. Now, a big challenge I have here is to get this face off. There's two rivets right there and there. So those are going to have to come out. So I'm going to try to get to the back side of this and see if I can't grind off the rivet from the back side so that hopefully I can reuse this. I do see there's a little bit of rust on these, so I'll try to clean that up too. The other challenge is getting this needle on in the right place. There's not a pin or anything on there. So I got an idea for how I can do that. What I've got here is this is a jumper battery, and it's 12 volts. So I've plugged in my new jack onto the back of this tachometer, and I have it connected, the positive and the negative, to this battery here. Now, this meter, somehow it rests at 11. So I need to know that. But here's what I can do. Watch this. Turn this on and boom, it goes right down to there. So what I might do is put the power on it and then make sure I get this on in exactly that right place again. Now when I shut the power off, see how it creeps up? I'm not sure what it's going to do here. It's sitting on 4. Maybe that's what I ought to be shooting for. But anyway, I'm going to write down these numbers, and that'll be what I'm shooting for. And when I put it back on, I'll be able to test it this way to make sure that it's on in the right place. So that's kind of important. Okay, there's a couple more screws on the back. Now, I have never had one of these open before, so you're gonna kind of be following right along with me. Looks like it's gonna come right out now. There we go. Couple places for light bulbs. Oh, that's the brake warning light. This top one is where the brake warning light, and this bottom one is for the right turn signal. You see down here, and then that says brake up there. So that's going to be reused. I am going to pull that needle off of the front right now. We'll see how this goes. Yikes. Well, it's all in one piece. Boy, it's super fine needle in there. Wow. This is some little shade. Looks like it had some foam on it at one time. I may replace that. Oh my gosh, it's really deteriorated back here, but we're talking about some pretty old stuff here. Okay, so that came off. There's the printed circuit board. So I guess if you were replacing a printed circuit board, this would be the same procedure here. So let's set that aside. Alright, now this should come off. There we are. Okay. Yikes. I don't know if you can see how small that needle is that's sticking out of there. But it is tiny. Boy, that is so delicate. Okay, and then here is the back side of those rivets. So I've got to figure out a way to straighten those up and get them to go through the front side. I've got one of them out now, so it took me quite a while to come up with a procedure for doing this, and I'm hoping to reuse this little thing. If there's enough left on the back of it that I can put it in on the new one and then pin it over again. That would be on the back side here. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside. First thing I did was I taped this tube onto the back or the front side of it, so that way I was sure I wasn't bending that little needle that's sticking out of this thing. Okay, so that's protecting the needle. Now here's the other one. So the next thing I did is I clamped this thing to the workbench here. And then what I did, I have these really fine files. This is a tiny, tiny rat tail file. I mean, you can see and compared to my finger how small it is. This is the hardest, pointiest thing I could think of that I could find. And then what I did is I went along the edge of it and I just kind of gave it a little tap, tap, tap there. That little thin wire is still good there. Did you see what I forgot to do there? I didn't look for that rivet. I was so worried about that little needle sticking out of the front. I forgot all about the tiny rivet. So I've just spent the last 10 minutes on my hands and knees looking around the shop floor here. And I found it. So that was a minor miracle. So I'm putting that in the little tray with the other one. And I'll show you where we're at right now. We've got disassembly pretty well taken care of. There's the back for it. A couple pieces of the plastic. The printed circuit board. Another piece of plastic that holds the lights for the turn signals. And there's the two face plates. The original one's a little dented up now, but I'm not really interested in that, so that's okay. So now I'm ready to reassemble, but I'm going to look into maybe finding some new rivets instead of trying to use these other ones. There really is not a lot left on the backside, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, I'm taking the tachometer out of the Corvette now. So I'm kind of lucky because I've already taken my steering column out, so it probably won't be as tough as some jobs. It looks like just a few screws around the perimeter, and then I think we'll be wrestling things off of the back of these gauges. So let's see how this goes. Okay, after much fiddling around and unplugging things behind where I couldn't really even see what I was doing, I have the speedometer cable disconnected. The speedometer and tachometer cables are disconnected. I've got all the light bulbs unplugged back there, and they are color coded in ways that I'm just hoping I'll be able to get them back in the right place. Some of them are important, like the turn signals and the brake light bulb. So anyway, here got the whole assembly out here. And what I really want is this tachometer side. So I labeled the hoses going to the switch for the headlights that run the pneumatic doors on the headlights. And I also made a bucket here and I labeled them dash screws. Okay, well that was a real bear. I got it out of there. So here's what we have. These are the instruments. This is what you see. So we're just going to take this off, and then we'll be able to compare the electronic one with this mechanical one. All right. Here's the front of the mechanical tach. Another thing that I was looking to improve on is if you look at how bleached out the red line is there. I mean, it's an orange line, whereas this one is a lot darker red. Another thing I wanted to verify here at this time is, are these the same? And it looks like they are the same. So we'll see how that goes. Now, here's the thing. This is why I went and got this. If you recall, when we were taking this one off, I had those little tiny rivets to deal with, and I had to pound those off. Here's one of them right here, a little bitty thing. Of course, you don't focus here. Can't see this now. Focus. Anyway, I was thinking later, after doing that when I bought this, I thought, well, this isn't going to be so bad because there's just 2 screws on the face of this tachometer. And so when I got the mechanical one, I mean the electronic one out, and it had those rivets, I was a little surprised by that. Well, if you look at the one that I just took off of my car, that's got screws on it. That's going to be way easier. So that's why I went and took this off right now. Otherwise, I would have just finished up the electronic tach and been done with it for now. So what you can see here, on the workbench, I've added this strip of tape down the middle. And what I'm doing is I'm going to keep electronic tach parts on that side, mechanical tach parts on this side. And I'll be taking parts from both sides to make my new electronic tach. You can see the front, look at some of it looks very similar, but when it gets around to the back, there's quite a bit of difference. So it's going to have to be this one that I use. So let's get to taking apart this mechanical tach. So we're going to start with the front here. Oh my God! Oh boy, that thing don't want to come off of there. But I just hate to do that. Well, here we go. Can you see what I'm doing there? There it is. This is the back side of the electronic tach, and this is the back side of the mechanical tach. This one has a counterweight on it. This one doesn't. The back side of the electronics tach's original face is smooth. The back side of this, you can see where the letters are actually embossed. I mean, it's been stamped. I can fix that later. Alright. So there's that one. And that one. So that'll match up with the 73. So we're cool there. So off camera, I have cleaned up these contacts as best I can with some 320 sandpaper and some steel wool. So when this plug goes in there, I should get decent contact. The other thing I have done is to replace these flimsy little plastic things that had, well, now I see it, it looks like cork on the back side. I don't know if you can see that there or not, but for some reason Chevrolet was very interested in getting that sealed up good. So I used some, this was just some craft foam from Hobby Lobby, and I cut it into the shapes as close as I could with an X-Acto knife. So that is ready to go. So now is the tricky part that I'm a little bit nervous about. And what I've come up with here is I went and got the the tack out of my 73, which has screws on it. But unfortunately, the way that the 73 was made, this stuff is all very robust. I mean, you can see this is some heavy, not heavy gauge steel, but quite a bit thicker, and it's got threaded holes where those two screws went. And this thing has a considerable amount of weight to it. And this replaces all of that, and it's pretty light, so it's, I guess, one of the ways they lightened up the car. Okay. The hole spacing is different on these. Those holes don't line up, so this just became a lot more complicated. This is the can that the electronic, I don't know if you call that a motor, but that's what turns the arrow. And this is the top part of the mechanical one. I took this plate right off the top. Now, both of these pieces have the holes that the plate mount on. And if I hold them real close together, you can see how the spacing is different. This top one, they're wider than the bottom one. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to lay this piece into this can so that it's flush with the top, so that this screw hole, the surface of this is in the same place as that, so that when the face comes in, it rests evenly all the way around this surface here and is screwed on by these holes right here. Now, just to make things more complicated, those holes, well, let me just go off this way. They line up right with the edge of the can, so there's kind of no room for the nut behind them, just to make things interesting. So I'm going to cut off these tabs because I still do need to be conscious of where this is clocked because of these holes in the back. So I'm gonna cut off those tabs, and I'm gonna cut down the side far enough that this can lay in, and then I'm gonna knock off the ears off of both of these sides because I don't need those. And then I'm going to cut down the side of the can far enough so that I can get a nut in there. And then I'm gonna JB weld this right onto this can. And I gotta figure out some way to get that all centered on there. So that's stuff I haven't figured out yet, but I'm not gonna let this stop me. So I'm gonna look at this a little bit off camera and we'll see what I come up with. All right, I've done quite a bit here off camera. Now, if you look close at it, well, first of all, let's look at the back side here. You can see my JB weld on there, and it's not pretty, but of course, you know, all of this is going to be covered up so you won't see it. And what I figured out is I don't need room for the nut on the back side because this is the plate that has the threaded holes in it that the screws go into. So I'll be able to use the exact same holes that the original plate that, you know, was the, what was it, 35 or 5,300 RPM face went on. And that problem about the edge of the can being in the way, what I did is I took this chisel and I set it right on the edge, and then I hit it with a hammer. So what it did is it put a nice little divot in there. So it pushed the can in a little ways. I did that on both sides. And now, I think it shows up there. You can see that I got a straight shot right out of there. And also, you see that that little needle that the meter, the arrow, the pointer is going to attach to, it is beautifully centered right on that hole. One thing I did have to do is there was an extra little brass bushing on this piece for the mechanical tachometer. And I'm a little surprised. There it is. Here it is, this little guy right here. This was in there. and that gave it a little more strength. The mechanical tachometer, I think, is a little bit heavier, and so they were just looking for a little more support for that meter, that rod sticking out there. Well, you can see here that little needle doesn't hang out very far, but look at how far this one sticks out. I mean, it really did need some support on it. So anyway, I took that off of this one because I didn't want the extra drag in case I didn't have that hole exactly lined up on there. But it is nice and flush on the top. You can see my JB Weld is a little bit gooped on that. I'm going to hit that with the file and get everything nice and flattened out on it, and then we're going to start assembling this thing. So we're in the home stretch now. It's always nice when we get to assembly process. This JB Weld has had a chance to dry overnight, so we're good to go. Okay, so it's now beautifully flush there. Okay, all the way around. And I managed to not knock that little needle off of the front while I was filing on it. Also, I said I was going to nip these ears off of here, and this is delicate enough. I mean, I've pulled on it pretty good, but God, I don't really want to break it off of there. All right, here we go. I'm pulling. That JB Weld is holding. It's doing good, but I'm still going to leave those in there. That's not going to hurt anything inside of here. I mean, there's plenty of room in behind there, and I just don't want to tempt fate any more than I have to. All right, so let's go to item next. We put the printed circuit board on, okay, and it goes in that way, and I got that labeled the top. Okay, so that's on good. Then the next thing that goes on is this plastic part, and this is where this being clocked correctly, I don't know how I could get that wrong, comes into play. And then there's another set of the same kind of nuts again. Okay, so those three nuts are in there. All right, now this is my new black pieces that I made. This goes on first. And then this goes on this way. And now I'm going to put my gloves on because I don't want any fingerprints on this face that I'm going to be seeing and looking at for who knows how many miles. So here's the new one. That's good. Looks good. All right, and my little screws. It's coming in very nicely. Now it's going to have just those two screws on the front, just like the speedometer on my 73 gauges. Okay, I've got both of the screws in now. And you can see it, this plate is nice and flat on there. Held on very good. I've got the turn signal lens at the bottom and the brake lens at the top. This is the housing for the electronic tach. Oh my gosh, I'm just looking at this and you can see where water had stood in here and rusted it a little bit. Jeez. So this has been in somebody's parts bin for some time. I'm gonna do a little bit of cleanup on this, so I'll be right back. Okay, I used a little bit of steel wool and I got 85% of the rust out of there just to clean it up a little bit. That ought to, I guess I just drop it in here and these screws that go in. So we're making some progress. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna hook up the wires to it again. I won't be able to see anything, but I'm going to turn the power on again. Now that, theoretically, has just turned itself to 0. So now I'm going to turn it off, and then I'm putting my gloves back on. Needle is going on the same place that I took it off of. Oh my gosh. All right, that one went on, but that's not the one that came off of it. Okay, I'm gonna move this around, and then I'm gonna turn on the power. Oh man, I missed that by a mile. Okay, okay, I missed it by quite a ways. A bit. All right, so we're gonna set it at, all right, here we go. Ooh, it's coming in at like 100 RPM. Okay, I'm pulling it off at 11. I'm off by about 10. You know what? I'm gonna leave it on. All right, so we're putting it in right on 0. Here we go. Yeah, that didn't work either. Try it again. Turn it on. Boom. 0. Okay, we nailed it. Oh. Just to tempt fate. I think it did move down a little bit by doing that. And we're hitting 0. Forgot these little black shades that went on the back. Okay, back together again. The last part of this process. There we go. Fits on there nice and snug. And this is a little clip for the wiring harness that's back there, which made it very difficult to get this thing out of there. Okay, so that's in. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is, I know this black wire goes to ground, so I'm going to put a lead on it, and I'm going to screw it. This is where the ground hooks up from the car, and then that hits all of this metal stuff here. Okay, so I put a little lead on the end of this black wire, which is ground, so now that's grounded out. And now all I have to do is wire these two. This pink one will go to the fuse panel. Somewhere I'll get some fused power. And then this one goes to the distributor side of the coil. And I think there might need to be some kind of a resistor or something maybe in the line too. I'm not sure about that yet, but I'll find out about that at the time I go for the full installation. But let's have a look at the front. Now, this is the first time I'm looking at it too. Now we've got both gauges there, and they've got the same font. Ooh. and it's got the 2 screws and the 2 screws. It's funny to work on something that when you get done, you can't tell you did anything. But that was the plan, and looks like I've got it. I'm going to hook the battery up to it again. Makes me a little nervous. Well, looks like it came in right at, let's see, what is it? 100 RPM. Looks like maybe 50 RPM. We're gonna call it close enough, although if I wanted to change it, boy, now would be the time. But I have to say, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Boy, it really challenged me with that whole, with those screw holes being different widths. But we got her done. Thanks for watching my YouTube video. I hope if you were planning on doing this, now this will give you an idea what you're getting into. I didn't know about those hole spacings there, but you can get around it. I was able to do it, and from what I can tell, that gauge is still going to work, you know, since it did that power thing. I did test it before we did any of this. Please like and share my video if you found it helpful. You're watching On the Mark with Mark.